Hello, welcome to this OzDox streaming event. We are broadcasting today from the AFTRS Theatre, the Australian Film, Television and Radio School. Before we begin proceedings, I would just like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. To all Aboriginal people and elders past and present, we pay our respects. This land was, is and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to the first OzDox event for 2016, everybody. It's great to see such a full theatre tonight for this very special event and tribute. Just to tell you briefly about OzDox. OzDox, the documentary forum, holds monthly events at this theatre, and we have masterclasses with top practitioners in their fields. We have forums about ongoing issues. We have explorations of emerging technology. We have discussions on all sorts of issues, and sometimes we even screen films. You can subscribe to our events in our newsletter at ozdox.org to become informed of future events. We have a volunteer committee, and it's very elastic. To qualify for the committee, you have to put your hand up and just show up. It's not that difficult to get in. But we do welcome you. It's not onerous at all. We meet 2 to 3 times a year, and we plan future events, and you're most welcome to put forward ideas or even put your hand up to run an event such as this. Tonight's going to be a really special treat. We've got 7 top filmmakers showing excerpts from their films, and they've all been shot by Tony Wilson, and they'll be discussing his contribution to the films and recollecting what it was like working with Tony. Tony died suddenly at the end of 2015, and his death, 2010, sorry, 5 years ago I was thinking. His death has been a great loss to the filmmaking community, and so we're here to remember the amazing work that Tony did and to celebrate his personality as well. We'll try and have some audience participation with questions if there's time, but Leo has curated the program tonight, and because of the number of films and speakers, we've only got 15 minutes for each clip and speaker. But if I can possibly get in some questions, I will. If there is time, there's a microphone sitting just up there. It was going to be lit, but that light doesn't seem to be on. Brendan, maybe you could see it. It will be lit, thank you. So you need to go up to the microphone so that you can be recorded for the streaming and the final recording. That's about it for that section, and I just need to do a couple of quick thank yous. Thanks to AFTRS for supplying the theatre and the streaming facilities, to the Australian Directors Guild for their ongoing support, to Brendan Toole over there for the terrific poster. Thank you, Brendan. Andrew Arestides for preparing the clips that we'll be seeing tonight, and the various organisations and individuals who gave permission for the film excerpts, including National Film and Sound Archive, ABC and SBS. But particular thanks tonight goes to my colleague here, Leo Sullivan, whose idea it was to have this tribute night to Tony Wilson. Most of you will know that Tony and Leo were the crew to get. If you were ever working on a doco, you'd say, who are you working with? Tony Wilson and Leo Sullivan. Say, everything will be all right. And sometimes it was Leo. But why was that? It was because they were so bloody good at what they did. And they were relaxed. The times that I worked with them, I thought, they're relaxed. They really seem to know what they're doing. So maybe I should relax too. Good bluff. Very good bluff. So tonight is also a celebration of that increasingly rare and endangered species, the observational documentary. Some of you may have seen, but if you haven't, I'll draw your attention that David Tiley, the editor of Screen Hub, this week did an interview with Leo and expanded it to a broader article. It's called Observational Documentary, Reality TV and the Death of Independence. There's hardly any optimistic articles about documentary in these days. So do catch up with that on Screen Hub. If you can't get in because it's a pay site, then have a look on the OzDox website and also on Facebook. So here's Leo.
Well, obviously, thanks everyone for coming. I don't want to say much because I think it's about the work, and we'll talk about that. But I do have to do a couple of thank yous, particularly OzDox, giving me the opportunity to put this together. Rod, particularly, we've worked for weeks, months, getting this together, and it's been great. It's taught me a really important lesson, why I never want to be a producer. Thank you, Rod, well done. Andrew's done fantastic work and reminded me how much fun it is in the cutting room. You know the saying, if you want to get something edited, get a busy editor. And that worked. Thanks, Andrew. I especially want to thank Lucinda, who's here tonight, Tony's wife and business partner, for supplying me with all the DVDs. Tony was very proud of his work, and rightly so, and he was a very keen archivist, so we had a good collection to work from. Otherwise, actually, it was really hard to find copies of these films, which is actually really sad. So tonight what we're going to see is clips, as Rod said, from 7 or 8 films out of a long and distinguished career. It's a difficult choice, but it was sort of decided by availability of people and things to talk about. But I've tried to sort of put together a cross-section that will give a flavour of all the films. And I've also not cut the clips too short, so we get a sense of what the film was about, I hope. I hope you get a sense of that, and you might want to have a look at some of these films. For those that know Tony would know I've made one glaring omission from showing. Tony had this peculiar habit of doing many, many cutaways of animals during his shoots. And I wanted to put together a sort of selection of clips from all the films, and it was just impossible. Trying to get the screening rights from the Defence of Generic Media Animals Association, impossible, otherwise known as DOGMA. But having said that, I just want to finish what I was saying. The technologies of filmmaking have changed drastically from 16mm, Betacams, Handycams, and now the larger chip cameras. But the skills of observation that people like Tony have, and the listening and the rapport with your subject hasn't changed. And that's what I hope people will get out of this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Eric. We wanted to start off by, in a sense, bringing Tony into the room. So, Alan, could we have clip number 2, please?
Setting up the tripod. Extend the bottom legs first, and I'll explain why I do that in a second. And then lean the tripod on the front leg and pull the back legs towards you. If you do that, you'll look really professional. Okay, now when you put the camera on the tripod, make sure that you hear that click, because that ensures that even if you accidentally let it roll back or forward, that the camera can't actually slide off the head itself. All right? And then you lock the camera on the tripod. Now, the reason that I extend the bottom legs first is that if I need to adjust the height slightly, I bring the legs together and I only have to lean this far down, okay, to make the height adjustment rather than going right to the bottom. It's just a much easier way of doing things. Then again, leaning on front leg and pulling rear legs towards you. And once again, just checking the level of the bubble. And then you're away. One last thing, when you finish the shot and you're walking nearby to maybe the next location, lock the camera off. If it's a long way, I'd probably take the camera off the tripod and carry the tripod in one hand and the camera in the other. But if it's close by, lock the camera, lean legs together like this, and carry the camera like this. Easy.
It brings it all back, doesn't it? Leo, I noticed there's a bit of an aeroplane in the background there. The irony for those of you who hadn't worked with Tony is that it was actually very, very rare to see him with a tripod. And in fact, there was a story that somebody said, you never seem to use the tripod. What's the tripod for? He said, it's just something for the director to carry around. That was my memory very much of Tony. I was lucky enough to work with Tony on a few occasions, not always for television. Sometimes he worked on some of the corporate things that I did with my partner, Leslie Siebold. And one of the series we did, it started off for a little video for the Institute of Early Childhood at Macquarie University. And it was a celebration of what they did and their philosophy. And they absolutely loved the film, but they absolutely fell in love with Tony. And they said, we'd like to do another one, provided we can have Tony Wilson. And so we ended up doing 4 with Tony. And I just wanted to show you a little clip of something that none of you would ever have seen. Please ignore the narration, which is there constantly. But it's just a little clip showing Tony's lovely attention to detail. It was all filmed in a childcare centre, and we just sort of knew in general what was going to happen. They were going to do a little exercise with the kids, but we weren't quite sure what the results were going to be. But each time Tony would notice these little details and moments. So the next clip, please, Alan, number 3.
Adult presence is important for facilitating, supporting and scaffolding children's learning.
Oh, right over there. I don't know if I can reach it. Here it is. There. Oh, that's a perfect one. It's only got to split up the back. Okay, put it on there.
Drawing objects from life, like these cicadas, extends children's encounters with the natural world.
Now, let's not lose them because we haven't... If you keep moving them...
This kind of drawing develops children's abilities to notice and enter into relationships with other beings or objects.
They've got tiny, tiny little claws. Do you want to start with this pointy bit here? Okay, well then you do 2 curving things coming from that pointy bit. Now, you've kind of got a really complicated bit where the legs come out. Do you want to start with the legs and see if you can do the body afterwards? Here's something to point with here. 2 of the legs have these hooks on them, these bigger hooks, like claws. That's it. Do you see them, Chris? There's one there. See how this was the first one well, that's actually the second one you did, and then that one was too small. So you made this one bigger, but something went wrong with the joining. So then when you rework this, you've done it. Now, what would you do if you did another one?
Yeah, it was such a treat to look at these sequences afterwards and see what Tony had done. Okay, now we're into the meaty part of it. Our first of the main clips that we're going to see is from a film called Advertising Missionaries, which was made in 1996. We'll have tonight Andrew Aristides, who is the editor. The directors were Chris Hilton and Gautier Floda. The routine for tonight is I will just read a little synopsis of each film, we'll see the clip, and then we'll bring on somebody to talk about it. So, Walkabout Marketing is a troupe of performers who visit remote villages in Papua New Guinea and perform vignettes to promote the sale of Western products like soft drink and washing powder. Multinational companies have been paying these actors for 10 years. The documentary follows the troupe around New Guinea and records the reaction of the engrossed audiences, and it also parallels the story with some glimpses of village life without Western goods. Thank you, Alan.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Up and down, round and round. There's the way to brush your teeth with a Colgate gentle crew. There's the way to brush your teeth.
Bye bye. Bye, mommy. Bye bye.
Highway.
When we are on the road, we fear rascalism, we fear tribal fights up in the highlands. It is very, very dangerous job to us. We keep doing it because it's the money that we earn. So the family and everybody benefit out of it. So no matter if it is very, very dangerous to us, but we keep on doing it. We fit in nicely because we've been traveling for years together, and it is like the extra family to us. Sometimes we do have arguments and a fight, but we cool off and then we come back again. We are happy, everybody's happy, and then we continue to do our work.
Mona, first prize. Okay, Monica now. Monica.
When we are traveling around, these boys, they treat me very special and they treat me as their queen. They look after me, they give me security, and we all work together as one team.
As part of the advertising agency's thrust into more remote areas, this journey will take them deeper into the highlands than they've ever been before, to the Yaluba Valley, Awako's home. In traditional Huli society, men and women have very little to do with each other. They tend their own fields and live separately. Awako lives with his father, uncles, sons and nephews. The young boys moved from living with the women into the men's hut at about 6 years old.
Mana ini anggungu harada matago umbiriago wabulubiria wali akali tongo mandagi padari yawa o wali bagane ibu wa mandagi padari akali tongo no khorobiria ai awuri akala wa ine anda anggungu harada mari biria o ni mendego ine romo wali mingini nalu kamari wa ine khorobiria ai ina tongo mo ko akadane o ine tongo no onde diragiri ko mo khorobiria. Aji wan kaman manao, misin manao, o baganda bijengi wa, o tindi nu maru nambi maru piali hao, mo jibu o inen di lewa. Hoga Mwadi Malagi Padaman, Marim Malagi Pada, Marina Markama Malagina Padamal.
In the face of the new culture, it will be difficult for Awako and the men in the valley to keep the traditional separation between the sexes. These elaborate preparations for a sing-sing are one way that men can still reinforce their identity.
Andrew. Take a seat. Andrew Aristides, who had the luck to edit that.
I've just prepared a little intro to my years of working with Tony stuff, so I'll just read it out. I cut 7 documentaries filmed by Tony over 15 years, and he gave me amazing rushes. And I was always a bit overwhelmed wanting to do them justice. As you can see, there was just fantastic stuff in that excerpt. The coverage was fantastic. Never a frame was wasted. Perhaps that was his film background. He was never bored by the detail of life. He had a sense of humour, and he loved shooting the absurd. Not only would he get amazing moments of pure observational verite, but when he saw something to the side, he would go back and get it. As Leo pointed out, he loved shooting animals, and those stray shots were often woven into the narrative as observers of human folly. The thing that was really unique about him, and everyone's going to say this, is that he listened. He really listened. He immersed himself in what was happening, so it wasn't just about getting shots. Tony was about getting those prime moments. He had amazing intuition, a sense of what was happening, not trailing behind the action, but somehow being just where action was breaking. The editors, all editors that I know that worked with his stuff, loved cutting his material. The way he moved around a subject, capturing not just the essence of the scene, but also managing many angles and points of view. He also knew when not to move the camera. A great example, which came to mind, is an interview that he did in a documentary that I cut on 2 surviving sisters from the Holocaust in the documentary Brothers and Sisters. He held a shot of the 2 sisters sitting on the couch, a mid-shot locked off, the distance between them showing their lifelong animosity, despite surviving the death camps. Tony just held it, resisting the urge to draw in on a close-up. He knew when to be the passive observer, and he also knew when to move. I cut Advertising Missionaries 20 years ago. It was the last doco, I think, that was shot on Super 16, which would have been the beginning or a turning point for Tony heading into the video age. It was also my first film on non-linear, cutting on Avid. It was the first time I worked with Tony's footage, and it's probably unusual in that it's not a strictly observational film. The camera's more fixed, the action is captured more in set pieces, and the feel and the scope is cinematic. Okay?
If anybody would like to engage, please make your way over to the microphone there, and I'll see you. Give us a wave, and happy to take your questions for any of the guests from now on. I understand that film had 2 directors. Was that any kind of an issue? What sort of role did Tony play in between?
I'm not quite sure about Tony's role with the 2 directors, but I imagine it would have been quite hard. It was a co-production with the French. I was originally actually going to go to Paris to cut the film there, so it was all very exciting at that time, and I had 2 young children and we were all going to go off there. And then at the last minute, it was summer in Sydney, the French director said, "I'll come to Sydney." So, and I was actually told that he was going to be difficult to work with because he was French and he was European. And we actually got on really well. It was actually a very good experience. And yeah.
Pleased to hear that. I recall Bob Connolly telling a story. I'm not sure if it was this director or, Tony was a charmer, but could also be contrary. That story, yes. Do you mind if you're going to tell it?
If you like.
No, you tell it. It's your story, but yeah. Okay, we'll come to that later. Just keep that in mind. Tony did really embrace the digital age in a big way. I went to one of his camera classes, and I was just at that point of wanting to get a camera, and went to him, and he was just so generous with his information, and in fact, I just basically got the kit that Tony had, and even down to the same low pro bag and everything. I just thought, well, if it's good enough for him. But it was simple. It wasn't a complex thing, and he seemed to really enjoy that reducing everything down to a bag that he could just carry over his shoulder from the film days.
That period where he went into teaching people how to use the small camera, I've got probably 2 examples of directors that I worked with who had been through his classes, and you could actually see the improvement in their work as they did those classes, from the kind of the wobble cam and the moving around to actually shooting like Tony would have shot. So yeah, it's really interesting.
And for those of you who don't know, there's a thing called the camera class, which was run by Leo and Tony, and it was just a wonderful experience learning from people who had just been doing it all their lives and were so generous in sharing their knowledge. All right, anything else you'd like to say?
Well, if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to...
Otherwise, we'll keep rolling. We have got time pressure.
Yeah, you've got a fair few things
to
get through.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Just by way of an interlude, quickly, you may be wondering what this is, but when I was thinking about Tony, and I thought the one thing we had in common was we both believed in a patisserie a day keeps the doctor away. So I thought I'd bring along a patisserie in memory of Tony. I actually should have invited you to break patisserie with me, but yes. Yeah. So I'm going to have a little bite. It's apple Danish, if anybody would like to come and remember Tony. Next. Bob, you're going to be next, but I'll just read the clip. Our next film, pardon me while I chew, is called Democracy. It was filmed in 1984. This isn't really working, chewing and talking, is it? No, I'll just have a drink.
The whole world's watching.
Hello world, yes. Democracy was part of a series made at Film Australia called the Real Life series. There were, I think, 6 or 8 films, and all observational documentary. Leo tells me that at the time it was considered absolutely scandalous that directors were given the shooting ratio of 20:1. Now, for editors in the audience, imagine if you had to cut a 1-hour film and someone came to you with 20 hours of rushes. Wouldn't that just be paradise? Yes, unlike the 200 hours that most people deliver these days. So Democracy follows the ups and downs of Peter McIlwain, who is an uninitiated Labor candidate running for a marginal Liberal seat in a suburban electorate of Sydney. From pre-selection through to election night, when the chips are down, we observe a man of the people, the local chemist, coping with backroom manoeuvring and making crucial decisions about campaign tactics. Democracy shows the range of personalities and egos that make up an election. Now, speaking to Democracy tonight will be Bob Connolly on behalf of the film, really, but the director and editor was the late Graham Chase. So, thanks, Alan. We'll run Democracy.
Why did it get so bitter? Was it a classic left-right confrontation, or what?
It was just a struggle. For, you know, it's two people with ambitions pitted against one another. Members of the ALP start who obviously weren't impressed with Mike Addis and obviously wanted another candidate, and I sort of then appeared to be the next alternative.
I don't think we should quote that.
No.
Okay. Do you see Cook as being winnable?
Very much so, yes.
It's
0.9%. 0.9% swing.
0.9%
swing.
Yeah,
don't want to quote me on this, but he'd always said that if I'd been the candidate last time, I would have won the seat. That's why I see the seat as being very winnable.
Mm-hmm. Peter wants to help him out to an early retirement, early pension, don't you, mate? He likes him so much.
Oh, well, then he can stay at home and do nothing all the time, I suppose. Size that remark.
So you've obviously forgotten they're there now, haven't you?
My only regret is that with a pre-selection ballot, it should be held a little bit earlier than what it is, because it does take a while for the other side to get over a defeat, and for the first few days, they're not exactly magnanimous in their support. I mean, most are, but some aren't. Anyway, we'll win. That's the main thing. You're not going to get a shot of the irony, are you?
He's got a few good ideas, you know. It's like if you let him have his head, he wants to go around and knock on business houses' doors, so you're getting away from the traditional fundraising sources.
Yeah.
You know Robert's he's going to work full-time.
Is he?
For the 28th of October. He'll have his holiday pay, he'll have over 4 weeks of holiday pay. With us on this thing, private property, do not enter. So that's there.
Yeah.
So we
don't want to be...
Oh, but yeah. They're probably Liberal voters anyhow, mate. Yeah, we'll do it discreetly and properly.
Any talk of how much rent is?
No, he said it'd be reasonable, but, you know, when you look at that the advertising, that's worth... They spent 4 pages of Victoria's $3,200 for that. Like, if it costs $1,000 a week, even that, you know, it's worth every cent of it. I know that's a lot of money, and a lot of people in the party won't go down well with it, but we can cut back on other areas. We cut back on newspaper advertising. And now the fact we've got a mobile van for nothing. But yeah, if we had a big working bee in here, we could get this cleaned up in a couple of days, couldn't we? We ought to clean them all out. We ought to put out in the campaign room.
Look at this one, Bert. Bloody champions, eh? The turban. He doesn't look so cynical there, does he, Bill Hayden?
No.
He hadn't been stabbed in
That
the
was
back.
77, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the 1977 campaign, the black and the white. Funny looking face, isn't he? No, he's a very handsome-looking bloke. I bet he is.
Bert, that's the outline. I was worried about, you know, with a surname like McIlwain, it's such an awkward name, and I thought whether we put Peter...
Like, well, why don't you change it? If you have one with a photo, you can probably do it the other way.
Yes, that's right.
Down, you've got the photo in the middle, and then McIlwain underneath.
Yeah.
A bit like Davies, but he was shit. And not all the way along, just sort of one.
We'll have plenty.
One. Yeah, I know we will. I know. Up and down the pylons would be good.
Paint round there.
See, if you have them up and down the pylons, people are more liable to see them. If you have them striped across, they're going to have trouble reading, you know, McIlwain. If you have a space, you know, like you have them...
Go, George. This is going to be one of our campaign rooms.
kids, that doesn't look very good back away now with the bloody liberal sign sitting up there.
What we're going to do, we replaced this bug about, I was after a couple of service station sites, and I was trying to get one of the shell at Miranda, fair anyhow. They led me along the bloody garden. Oh, this is real kind. I went up to the county council yesterday to get the power put onto the other one, and they didn't have this one listed. I'm a great movie buff, actually. I always remember a movie that Robert Redford starred in called The Candidate, and it was about his election to the Senate chamber in the US Senate. And the great final scene was, after he'd been elected by the manipulations of machines, etc., he stood and looked at his campaign manager and said, "What do I do now?"
Oh, I got a call from head office yesterday, and that great folk legend's coming out tomorrow. He's making one of his rare trips to Sydney at 5:30, so we've got to be there at 5:15.
Oh, I imagine he's got a very busy schedule.
But hopefully I can tie up that thing. I spoke to Ray Gleason about having him for a dinner here at the Trade Union Club, seeing they were helping us with the funding. And hopefully I can just tie that up tomorrow night with him.
Oh, that would be good. Do you want to start your taste and then would you like anything else with that? Or
I'm dieting here, don't you know?
Have they got makeup there? We've got to get to all that.
Well, I was surprised it was being done at head office. You know, knowing Hawke style, I thought it would have been done where they'd have had a, you know, unless it would have had a professional, like a professional studio, because you'd hardly say that the Sussex Street's got professional studios.
Well, there must be.
They might take us into the big room with the oaken room with the photo of Ben Chifley behind us. Give us a bit of class. We'll probably replace it with the photo of Bob Hawke.
I think that's our cue to go in.
No, they do. Individual, yeah.
Senior interest in your second last.
Yeah. I'm asked.
That's right.
Only a couple more to go.
I bought
Peter McElwain.
Oh, good. Man. I bought my entourage of my own sort of press photographers, etc., etc., etc.
Okay. Top button,
Right. Is that too bulky? That?
Oh, no. Just turn your body in a little.
Right.
If you whip a bit more, turn it around that way. That's better.
Right. You must get see this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Something's got to be done.
Yes. We need it.
Right, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Colour? Yes, please.
For this film, that's quite good. That's actually good. It's really good value for us.
So a bit of chatting away.
Okay, chatting away. Yeah. I'm the friend of Ray Gates, actually. Ray's in my branch, actually.
Oh,
I've been training the day for me.
Up to me this time, but
Yeah.
this way. That's it. That's right. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Ray's going to be helping us in the campaign.
Yeah, we can.
No,
We've got a cricket match, have you? We're on Sunday. Okay. Hold on. Okay. We'll go.
Thanks, mate. Okay.
Do you want to see? Have you got some time next week, Shane? Next night, like we've been given a whole list of a whole list of ministers that are available to see us. We sort of want to try to fit into a bit of a timetable if we could.
When do you want
Well,
Having a meeting. No, we don't want any bloody maddies in there. Righto. All the best.
We want evidence as far as it's humanly possible.
They haven't yet, so I don't think it'll start there.
Very hard. I think we're looking at
The largest number of tickets.
We're looking at the largest number of tickets possible.
Yeah. We'll have 30 or so people there apart from the...
Someone's coming down to talk to Kate more about Kevin. He knows it's cool.
There we are. Okay, Steve.
I've forgotten. We haven't
Done all the members.
Yeah, he's got all that done in that time. See, it's a fixed, it's all
I just want to mention that it was actually quite difficult to get permission to show that clip, which was straight. While I'm talking, would you like it?
Nah.
National Film and Sound Archive, when we approached them for it, I thought, well, you know, what could possibly be the problem? But they said on their file we had to get the permission of the candidate, which, come on, that was made in 1984. So Leo got on the case, and there's something probably most of you haven't heard of, something called the White Pages. And he got onto this thing. Apparently it's a new app. And he got onto the White Pages and tracked down Peter McIlwain. And I'm just going to say hello to Peter, because Peter's actually watching the streaming tonight from where, Leo?
South Coast.
South Coast somewhere. So hello to Peter. Yes. Over to you, Bob.
Thank you. Well, I should say this is a book reading in a way, because I'm actually writing a book at the moment, and I've written my first introduction to Tony, first time I worked with him. So I'll just read you excerpts from it, and then we'll go on and have a look at the clip, and then if we've got time, I'll tell you the lens cap story. The story I did about chronic overcrowding at Sydney's Fairfield Hospital, because that was my first outing with Tony Wilson. In 1968, Tony was the rising young cameraman. That's 15 years before Democracy was shot. It was the rising young cameraman that everyone wanted to work with. Neophytes like me had to wait our turn. He was so much in demand. And my usual fate was to be assigned a pickled old warhorse who called young reporters flies, resorted frequently to the whiskey flask in his hip pocket, and demonstrated a savage disinclination to take the camera off the tripod and move around with it. Tony, on the other hand, came to you right at the cutting edge and raring to go, and so I finally drew him. Fairfield was a public hospital on Sydney's southwestern outskirts, serving a population that John Howard would later typify as battlers. In 1968, it was swamped with patients, and in desperation, its administrator went public. Assigned the story, I found myself interviewing the man in a ward jammed with patients and stressed out nurses. After several questions, the administrator was close to tears. "The ward next to us is even worse," he said. "We just can't go on like this." "How do you mean?" I prompted, making a mental note to get pick-up shots later of the ward in question. Glancing down at my notes, I saw the umbilical sync cable connecting camera and tape recorder disappearing through an open door. Wilson was nowhere to be seen. I looked at the sound man, Gunther Ericoli, standing there with his Nagra recorder and boom mic. He just shrugged and grinned. And he pointed to the cable snaking out the door. Undirected and filming continuously, Tony had glided off to the adjacent ward, when the guy mentioned it, to give visual expression to what the administrator was saying. It was so bizarre I struggled to keep a straight face. Now, of course, what I'd seen was not cutting edge, far from it. When Wilson, Ericoli and I filmed at Fairfield Hospital in 69 or 68, the technological revolution that, and then I waffle in about the history of documentary, so I won't bore you with that. But with the advent of highly portable handheld sync equipment, Grierson's attempt at actuality suddenly took on a whole new meaning. Instead of directing their subjects in stage-managed studio or exterior locations, filmmakers were now freed up to observe them in unstaged real-life situations. For me, it all began with Tony Wilson back in 1968. Tony was mentor, collaborator, and ultimately role model for my eventual development as an observational filmmaker cameraman. So the homage I paid him at his funeral a couple of years ago came with the wisdom of hindsight. Quote, "Tall, bespectacled, thin-faced, frowning, with concentrated high purpose, peering out around the BL Araflex seated on its custom-designed body brace. Lithe, honed, expert, changing aperture and focus on the run, utterly attuned to the task at hand, no matter how trying the circumstances, missing nothing. Every thought and movement dedicated to capturing the action as it happened, instead of expecting the action to do as it was told, as so many of the fading old guard will want to do. Fairfield Hospital was not an observational documentary or anything approaching one. It was a 5-minute interview with an arresting cutaway sequence, a same-day story shot on the run as usual. We had no time to do anything but rush out to the location, set up the interview with the administrator, in one of the wards and shoot some illustrated material before rushing back to the office. What impressed me about Tony's solo foray into the adjoining ward was its spontaneity and the naturalism of the patients and hard-pressed staff that he had unobtrusively observed. While the administrator's words were compelling, the scenes in the next ward were even more so. The patients and staff were so preoccupied they scarcely noticed Tony with his shoulder-mounted camera. It was show rather than tell, a mantra that I would go to enormous lengths to obey in later years. Why set things up, Tony would say, when what's actually happening is usually so much more interesting. Now, I think everything that I say there is absolutely exemplified in this clip that we've just seen. It's an astounding piece of work, and I think it's worth a little bit of, if you like, close analysis if we've got some time. Sure. And I'm particularly interested in, obviously, the scene with Bob Hawke, because there's a dynamic going on there, and Tony was onto it very, very quickly, and everything he did worked towards reinforcing the dynamic and presenting it visually. Just in passing, there are two things that I think, the first is fairly straightforward. You know how irritated you get in feature films where they're trying to show a documentary sequence? It's always wobbling. Tony spent a lifetime developing an utterly rock-steady camera. And the second thing, and Leo asked me to remind you about this, and I think it's absolutely true because I worked with him for years and we did dozens and dozens of film together when he was shooting, was that not a lot of cameramen, but some, particularly in the older days, they were concentrating on getting their shots and getting the framing right. Now, Tony did that automatically. What he really did, what made him such a phenomenal observational filmmaker, was that he listened. And he was following what was going on. And this got better. In this sequence, for example, Leo tells me they fixed up, this is back in '83, so it's 35 years ago. They fixed up a transmitter, and so he had a headphone and was able to pick up the signal going to the NAGRA. The sound signal, yeah. So in other words, you know, and you can see that in what he's doing. But what is he doing? Standing in the hall waiting for Hawke. Tony Wilson is behind McIlwain and he keeps him in frame as Hawke and his retinue approach. And then they disappear into the room, leaving Mr. McIlwain milling nervously about like a schoolboy. He holds the shot as they talk about when they'll go in, giving the editor a natural cutting point. And then he moves back and he gets McIlwain standing there with his electoral assistant. But then when McIlwain is called in, Tony's shooting the guy who comes out through the door to call him in. So Tony's thought to himself, righto, what are we doing? We want to get the guy coming out. He is always there, getting the right shot at the right time. Okay, so then he follows him in and we get that first awkward, tight-lipped meeting with McIlwain and the Emperor. Now, those two men are sitting down. Tony's a tall guy. Now, not a lot of cameramen, some cameramen, I always say in the old days, in the old days, would have kept standing and the shot would have looked odd, wouldn't it? Tony's obviously on his knees. Leo? I don't remember actually. But yeah, because they're level. They're level. Now that, you know, you don't think twice about that, but of course when you start to think about it, he's a 6'2" guy, they're about, you know, that high. So he's got down on his knees to make sure that they're in exactly the right frame. Immediately he's down low and to patch the parent shot. And it also gives him an opportunity to zoom in to Hawke in the way that he did, right, in that wonderful mumbled sort of what have you. Okay, so it's a beautiful little sequence. There's the two of them in entirely appropriate tight close-up, mouth tight-lipped nothings to each other as the camera people snap away. And then we get a shot of the photographer before coming around to the two of them again so that we're on them when the photographer says a bit of chatting away. And so they chat away. Now then we get a shot, at the end of the session, Tony is on the money again, right in there where the two stand up and Hawke gives his cheesy indifferent farewell. He's there when McIlwain tries to get the ministerial timetable to try and get a couple of ministers to come on the hustings with him. And he is perfectly placed when Hawke comes out to catch the lift. McIlwain is in the background this time, whereas in the opening shot he's in the foreground. And so we're seeing the hawk come in from McIlwain's perspective, and now we see McIlwain standing there while the Emperor and his retinue go out. And what happens? McIlwain is just totally ignored. They all go into the lift, leaving the candidate there standing like a shag on a rock.
And it was McIlwain's lift because he was there first.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So there's an edge of hawk in tight close-up as Tony goes to the close-up to reinforce the distance between the two as they wait for the lift. And then he goes back for the 3 shot. He comes back, Hawke and Minder in foreground, framing McIlwain in background. The mirror reverse of the opening shot. Hawke and entourage disappear into the lift, leaving Mr. McIlwain and Minder waiting for the next one. Now you might think this is obvious, but it's not. All the way through this scene, Tony is thinking, listening, reacting, anticipating. So that when we need to see the two quote unquote antagonists, if you like, in their responses to each other, Tony's there to capture it. And of course he's been guided by an instinctive understanding of the underlying truth of the situation, which is that there's a massive pecking order in place here. Hawke is the bored, imperious, impersonal, preoccupied headmaster. Mr. McIlwain is the nervous schoolboy. Everything that Tony is doing is directed towards revealing that psychological truth. And so his tactical choices of camera position, framing and editing points are being driven by his strategic understanding of the sequence's psychological dynamics. I think it's an absolutely brilliant piece of filmmaking. Have we got time for the landscape?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't, but, you know, it's such a good story, yeah.
Well, Tony was wonderful with neophyte people, with beginners and with people who are a bit unsure about themselves, as long as they had the right attitude. Every now and again he would encounter people who were a little bit imperious, and that was always a fatal mistake on their part. And there's one famous story, and there'll be no names at all in this, but some of you will know who I'm talking about. The ABC in its wisdom, years and years, decades ago, hired a guy to come out whose English was not very good at all, but who had definitely had ideas of the pecking order. And they were doing something out at the airport, and Tony was getting by this stage a bit irritated, and so when the guy said to him, and he had a very, very strong accent, well, just get to me some lenscap. Lenscap, just lenscap. And Tony said, right, lenscap. So he sets the camera up, and he puts the lens cap over the front of the lens. And so when they're back in the rushes, and the fellow says, what is this? This is black, it is black. Tony said, you wanted lens cap? I give you lens cap. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. Our next film is by Curtis Levy, and we're lucky enough tonight to have Curtis Levy, director, and Les McLaren, the editor. And Leo Sullivan, someone called Leo Sullivan did the sound. Is there any of these films you didn't work on, Leo? Beginning to see a pattern in your curatorial duties here. Just quickly on the synopsis. Breakout covers the mass escape of Japanese prisoners of war from Cowra on the 5th of August 1944. It's one of the biggest prisoner of war escapes in world history. 234 Japanese prisoners and 4 Australians lost their lives. Most of the Japanese were killed while trying to escape, and others died by their own hand. 40 years later, 2 Japanese men returned to Australia, joining a pilgrimage to Cowra to visit the graves of their fallen comrades. The complex story of the Cowra breakout is told by these 2 men, the Japanese leader of the breakout and Australian guards, using interviews, narration, and historical and propaganda film footage. Thanks, Alan.
Those Japanese who died at Cowra lie buried in the countryside not far from the scene of the breakout. From time to time, ex-prisoners and families of men who died travel to Cowra to pray for the souls of those who lost their lives. 40 years after the breakout, Mr. Kawaguchi and Mr. Takahara have joined in a special pilgrimage to visit the graves of their fallen comrades. The graves are marked with plaques, many recording the false names used by the prisoners, because they hoped that their families would never find out they had been captured. One of Mr. Takahara's closest friends, Tadao Minami, whose real name was Toyoshima, was the first prisoner of war to be captured on Australian soil. Minami was one of the main organizers of the breakout. It was he who blew the bugle to signal the charge.
一番古い捕虜です。私らと一緒にバザーストに落ちたんです、この人は。ダーウィンの来たこれはゼロ戦のパイロットです。
After Minami crash-landed, he was taken by tribal Aborigines to the local Coast Guard, who had him placed under arrest. At Cowra, Minami became the first camp leader before being replaced by Kanazawa a month before the breakout.
ここでですね、亡くなられた方の死は決して無駄ではなかった。
無駄ではないと思います。
そういうふうにお考えになりますか？皆さんのお墓の前にお立ちになって、40年ぶりに感慨深い。
涙が出る。
どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.
Over 300 prisoners escaped from the camp into open countryside. Many were recaptured soon after the breakout, but some stayed on the loose for more than a week. A few chose to take their own lives rather than face going back into captivity. Mr. Kawaguchi and his friends headed for the nearby railway line.
歩いてくる時にトンネルが見つかったんで寒いしもうここで待って汽車でも飛び込んで死のうか言うてこの中入って3人が。
Fortunately for Mr. Kawaguchi and his friends, the train to Cowra was running late. But two others further along the line did meet their death under the train.
1時間もらわなかったと思うけどね、だいたい相当長いような感じだったね。
汽車が来なかった。
はい、もう汽車が来んしね。それで一人が、もう一人のね、3人で一人が、もうこう行っても、ここにおっても汽車が来んし、もう行くとこまで行こうかいうことになってね。そうしよう言うて、それでこう線路の横をね。
帰ってきましたら、日本はもう戦争に敗れてですね、もう焼け野ヶ原で、何も行く家もなかったという現状ですね。だからあらゆる点に日本がもうこっぴどくやられてしまっておったというのが戦後の一番の思い出ですね。
家族の方ですとかお会いになってすごく嬉しかったとか、そういう感情的な。
その点はいやしかし帰ってきたらね、葬式も済んでおりますしね、 その生きて帰ってくるなんて思ってないから幽霊やと言いましたね。いやもう家族がもう家焼かれてしまっておりますけれども、まあ私の葬式の写真と遺骨を置いといてくれましたからね。
それで僕がこう戸を開けて「進むかいたで」言ったら「いや進ませんしたい」いうことでね「いや進ませんしたい」言ったって「俺進むやないか」言ったら「いや」でびっくりしてね。それうちの兄貴の嫁とかね幼いしょる2階から母親がびっくりして階段も落ちんばかりにしてね降りてきてねで喜んでくれてね。
For his part as an organizer of the breakout, Mr. Kanazawa spent several months in solitary confinement in an Australian prison. Returning to Japan, he began his new life as a rice farmer, living on land owned by his family for generations.
目的を達することができなかったっていうのは死ねなかったもの、これが現在こうした内地送還されて今日こうしてみんなが幸せに暮らしているという姿を見ればああよかったなと。ただしそれには絶えずその河原に眠る戦友ですね、それに対してはすまないという気持ちは変わらないということです。
Okay. Director Curtis Levy and editor Les McLaren.
That film obviously wasn't so much cinema verite film, but there were elements of Tony's great skills in cinema verite, even in some of those situations which were quite structured. Tony brought to those scenes a great amount of sensitivity because that event was something that those people hadn't talked about for 40 years, and both from the Japanese side and also perhaps almost as much from the Australian side, but particularly from the Japanese side. So we were working in a situation where the ex-prisoners were at first very reluctant to tell their stories because in many cases they hadn't even told their families that they'd been incarcerated in Cowra because there was deep shame involved with having been a prisoner of war. So having people like Tony and Leo filming those very delicate situations was fantastic because Tony in particular had this ability to create great empathy with these people who were at first very nervous about being in the film, and in some cases the situations became almost humorous. I mean, we don't see what happened with the man who lay on the railway line to try and commit suicide, but what happened was there's a scene in the film where a farmer comes up to him and says, "Would he like to come back for tea and scones at the farmhouse?" And Tony does this wonderful, almost reenactment of the scene where that ex-prisoner goes back to the farmhouse and meets the farmer again, and it's a very touching scene in the film. So this film is obviously very different in the sense it's juxtaposing trying to bring to life an event that happened so long ago with the people who had tried to, keep those memories away from the public. We were fortunate to have Les, who did a wonderful job with the editing, and Leo, who I mentioned before. I think the editing was very crucial in this case in terms of the juxtaposition of the archival and the photographs, and that's something which Les might like to elaborate on.
Having not seen it for a long time, it's quite remarkable. About half the material, possibly more, is archive moving images and photographs, and there are very few photographs of the camp. And I understand that Curtis had 10x8 stills made of these, and that's all Tony had to work with. And so once again, he had that wonderful ability to see what was in front of him and pick out the key elements and to find a relationship between them. And so with a camera on a tripod, he's doing these tiny little pans and zooms the size of a matchbox with great fluidity. And so the good thing for an editor was to have the same person having worked on the film material, and they blended very well together.
Just noticing the shot in the cemetery, very, very close up,
Yes.
and I'm assuming Tony's standing right there and making no attempt to say I'm invisible, but I'm here. And that's a sort of hallmark of his work, isn't it, Les?
Once again, it's extraordinary observation, because if you look at almost every shot that he's got there that's not in close, there's always something in the background that's matching with or adding to the detail. So, for example, when the men are looking at the plaques, there's the Japanese flag up in the background. And when the other fellow's talking, there's always one of his compatriots walking in the background. And there's that moment when he zooms in on the close-up and the fellow cries and very abruptly leaves. And Tony doesn't miss a beat, he just follows it, and he steers the shot across as the man walks away, and that could be an ending. And then the man does a right-hand turn and he follows him, and that could be an ending. And then he comes back to include his compatriot in the final shot. And that was something about his material, that there were often many entry points and there were many exit points. He had such an understanding of the rhythm of events and relationships that he always managed to hold at the right time so he could come in and out very, very, very easily.
I think part of that was that he had such an acute use of all his senses. He was always able to not just see what was in the frame, but he was using his other eye almost as much to take in the whole scene, plus his ears, in terms of listening to what was going on around him. And so he was able to anticipate so much what was going to happen next, and plus his enormous understanding of as Bob was alluding to, the internal dynamic of the situation, because he always had a sense of what the kind of emotional undercurrents were to a scene, and was able to somehow evocatively portray what the undercurrents meant, which I think that last scene with the scarecrow, which could have been quite a mundane kind of coverage, was in Tony's hands a very poetic, evocative sequence.
And the juxtaposition of what he was saying, and that, well, I found it enormously powerful. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but Leo and I were watching it the other day. I was very moved by that. Unfortunately, we're pressed for time, so we'll keep on going. Thank you very much, Les and Curtis. Our next film is called Demons at Drive Time, which is one of the great titles, and we've got the director, Kerry Brewster, here. The film was made in 1995. Sound was Max Henser, and Andrea Lang was the editor. Is Andrea here tonight? Yes, hello. Synopsis, before we see the clip: a documentary overview of the high-rating radio announcers across Australia in 1995. The style is a day in the life of, with poignant reminders that ratings are paramount and that the shock jocks themselves are not necessarily committed to the rabble-rousing rhetoric they broadcast. Some of you will be reminded of some of these personalities, and I'm sure it'll bring out some gut feelings that we had about some of them. The film features talkback hosts Howard Sattler from Perth, Bob Francis from Adelaide, plus your favourites Alan Jones, Ron Casey, Brian Wiltshire and Stan Zemanek from Sydney.
Chances of an early election, eh? Hey, you never get any better than this? Well, Paul, you may not get it any better than this. There are 2 opinion polls today. Bad news for you, Paul, and it doesn't get any better than this. An election? Surely to God, you'd be running for cover.
In the time that we've been advertising on the Alan Jones show, which is one 60-second commercial Monday to Friday, over the 6 years or so, we have purchased more than $1 million worth of radio time just in doing that.
I'm a customer.
Who's never right.
No. I don't care, but I write the checks.
Why on Jones? Because he epitomises the target market that we need as an airline. He has a very dedicated listener readership. They have the market profile and the demographics that we want, and they deliver the product.
If every person had to apologise for every sexist and racist remark they made at lunch,
yes,
the country would be queued up from the Gulf of Carpentaria to Wilson's Promontory. Yes. Seriously.
No, I couldn't agree more. In fact, a guy...
Every time we sat at lunchtime and say, who was that bird you had last night? Mate, wasn't she a hot sort? Jeez, I'd like to... Eh? Utterly sexist, which dominates most luncheons.
Couldn't agree more. Double standards.
Dramatisation. No, I don't want to hear it.
Radioactive, the source of the power is radioactive.
2UE. This glass ceiling syndrome is a load of crap. Colour dot. It's an excuse used by women to justify their own shortcomings and their inability to get to the top.
Excuse me, Stan. Which headphones are you going to use?
I'll just use my normal headphones, okay?
Okay.
I'd like to hear from you people tonight on what you think should happen with immigration in this country. Do we have the jobs? You want that turned off? And are you happy to pay welfare payments to these new migrants? Okay, I'll just clean that up.
Yep, will do.
All right, great. Time to go.
Z for zebra. E for egg. M for Mary.
5 hours of fun and
Get
verbal
A.
fist fights. The Stan Zemanek Show on 2UE.
When I went up there and saw a sea of people, it must have been about 30,000 people surrounding Parliament House, I felt fairly uneasy, I've got to tell you, because all of a sudden I realised what a position I'd been placed in. These people largely had come there because I told them, or asked them, implored them to go there. And now, to a degree, I had them in my hands. I could say things to them, and they may do things that they would regret and I would regret later.
I went and skirted around, and the feeling I got from the crowd at the time was really deadly. It was very scary. It was like, you know, it's a wonder they didn't put on white cloaks. I felt that. But see, they don't need to put on white cloaks. They can come out in the open and speak.
It was a lynch mob. It was a lynch mob. And it was very scary. And the politicians were scared and were stampeded into legislation which brought WA into disrepute, not only within thinking Australians, but throughout the world as being a gross violation of children's rights.
He's thrived through that, finding out that kind of power is available, and he's a very dangerous man who pretends he's not.
This week only, Car Concern will install the latest anti-theft device in 2 cars for the price of 1. Upgraded technology allows a minimum 2-circuit mobilization.
Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly.
Putting a rainbow in your morning. Ron Casey.
They're flying high
Every piece of information.
over that old rainbow.
Everything that they have on you.
I wonder why, Lord, can't I?
Okay, this is the case on 2GB. Let's get into some calls. 269-0669 if you want to have your say. Why should we invite people to come here and then they make no effort to speak English and then we pay them not to work and we taxpayers forevermore carry that burden? As a matter of fact, we've got ethnic groups and ethnic leaders now saying that, oh, how can we preserve our language? Damn your language. Speak English. Let's all understand each other. In order to make them speak English, how about withdrawing interpreters, and if they can't speak English, they don't do business with the government departments?
Absolutely right. Yeah. And B, there is no welfare until 5 years residence, and they've proved themselves.
Joe, please stand for Parliament. I think I love you and I'm going to vote for you. Go on.
You just keep up the good work, Ron. Thanks very much.
He's probably upset a lot of people along the way, but I don't think he regrets anything. I don't think he's overstepped the mark too far.
Do you think he's racist?
No, no. And again, this is the Ron Casey away from the microphone. He's. I told him I was parkoury once just to get a reaction. And he keeps on bringing that up. I'm not parkoury, by the way.
It's these people that we take to our hearts and we let into this country, we let them in to share the good that we've accrued in this country, the way we've built this country to be what it is. We let these people come in without paying their dues, they settle here and suddenly they're part of our good life. And she says things like, you know, give people a fair go and don't cut them off so much and let them have their say. She's at home on the phone coaching me.
Well, no, not quite, but I must say in balance you get more criticism than
yeah, but you're the only person I'd trust to give me an honest criticism. I mean, anyone else that says much to me, I think they've got an angle.
Yes, well, that's true, you know, and I do give you the pat on the back occasionally, don't I?
Very bloody occasionally. I said those slope-headed, slant-eyed, bow-legged, rotten little bastards, what they did to Australians in World War II can never be forgiven. I was talking about the POW guards, and I was talking to an Australian digger on Anzac Day, on an Anzac Day broadcast, and he was talking about his mate who died in a POW camp. Now, those were the comments about, not about Asians and not about Japanese, but about Japanese POW guards. Now, surely I can say that. Because they were slant-eyed, slope-headed, bandy-legged, rotten little bastards.
Darling, don't say it.
Again.
Director Kerry Brewster. I'll just throw it to you. There's so much we can talk about there.
Can't see Andrea. Ah, yes, that brings back so many memories, eh? It's true. So when I was preparing to make this film, an editor who I trusted completely, Suresh, said, get Tony, and he's the best verite cameraman in Australia, and so luckily I was able to get him, and it was a fabulous shoot. It was really relaxed, and it wasn't with Leo, it was with Max Henser, and we had a terrific time because we were laughing. I guess we were having, you know, a laugh at the expense of the shock jocks involved. What I remember of the very first day of the shoot, we were shooting with Stan Zemanek in a shopping centre, and Stan was delivering his kind of clown performance, a shtick, and there were shoppers up here and shoppers all around, and they were laughing at his bad jokes. And I saw Tony, who's 6 foot and lithe, and he was sort of moving really quickly, and I also noticed that he moved the camera really quickly. Like, he was able to be up there and back on Stan and up there, and I'd never seen anyone work so fast with a camera. And at some point later, he said to me that, you know, technically he was so proficient, you know, he could shoot with his eyes closed. He said that what that meant, because he didn't have to even think about how he was shooting, that liberated him. So it enabled him to pour all his energy into observing and listening, and to employ all those skills, the amazing skills that he had. So, I mean, we know that he had this invisible antenna, you know, and he could listen in to all sorts of conversations that no one else could hear. In that little bit that we saw where you see Stan talking about the immigrant issue and are there the jobs, and then you cut to the...
But you hear the vacuum cleaner starting up, don't you? You hear it. I don't
You do, but, you know, look, Andrew and I laboured over this film, and, you know, so, you know, there's a lot in the editing, of course, but what I remember was that Tony said, "Quick, quick," and off he ran, you know, because he'd seen the cleaner first, and it was like to Max and me, "Get out of the shot," you know, get out of the studio, so he could get the cleaner and Stan in the same frame. So,
so that was entirely his.
He saw that, yeah, and he just
vision, and his perception.
And you know, sound was everything. And Bronwyn Murphy, who's here tonight, was telling me that in the early days of her sound recording, her first career as a sound recordist, she worked with Tony, and they were shooting an interview in a bus shelter, and it was very noisy. And Tony said to Bronwyn, just get in as tight as you want, as you need, with the mic, and I'll shoot around you. And that was really, really important. And I remember him saying that, not that he needed to say it to Max, really, but I do recall it being said at some point. Maybe it was with another sound recordist in Western Australia, you know, you get in as tight as you need, because as Bronwyn said, Tony said to her, if you don't, you know, if you don't have the sound, you don't have anything, you know. So I think what was mentioned before was Tony's comprehension of the dynamics of a situation. If someone was puffed up and someone was, you know, this sense of who was in control, who was embarrassed, who was feeling good about themselves, so he was underlining the, you know, the psychology of a scene all the time.
The cutaways of the two women at the lunch, Alan Jones, and he's talking about
the sexist jokes, and it's they were the most two of the most excruciating cutaways I've ever seen. Excruciated.
Yeah. But again, that's Andrea's work in the edit suite, because you know, obviously Tony couldn't get both things at once.
No.
So.
But he did go back and get it.
So Andrew and I are sitting in the edit suite going, this is the bit we want to use, the sexism bit, and then we looked for the appropriate cutaways. So there's a construction as well. It's not all done with the camera.
No.
But
Tony, you had the material.
Tony would be always looking for meaning in a scene, and he would look for the shot that would comment on what was happening, and And it was there to use in the edit suite, and you could use it or not, you know, but it was there to use. So he was clued into the sexism remarks. He sought those cutaways which were shot at a later stage in the lunch. And then we were able to put them together. So the other thing that Tony did really well was he didn't muck around, you know, and that was the beauty that he had of just trying to film something that was real, that was spontaneous, and that Howard Sattler had demonised a young Indigenous boy, teenage boy, who had, and that's what was that rally in Perth was all about. It was all around this one case of one kid in a stolen car being chased by cops, because in WA they routinely chased Indigenous kids in stolen cars, and they ended up in crashes, and you know, it was pretty terrible policy. So this kid had gone through a red light and smashed into the side of a car and killed a pregnant woman. And so Howard would get the surviving husband into his show and use it to bash this kid who was in jail. So as part of that film, we went to visit the home of the boy, and we turned up, and it was a very modest little house in Perth. We went in, we met the father, who looked pretty shattered by his life experience, I must say. But when we got inside, I noticed there was some photographs on the wall of his son who was in jail, and there was a trophy, and so Tony and I were sort of going, and while I was kind of umming and ahhing and going, oh God, how are we going to do this? This is really amazing being in here, you know. And Tony just said, we just start filming, you know, we just start filming. And so we filmed it, and I was able to ask the father about what was on the wall, and the father, it was a really beautiful scene actually, because the father was so proud of his son and sort of went around the room and described the boy's achievements. And so it was really heartbreaking. But that was Tony again going, don't muck around, don't make him feel uncomfortable, let's just do this while the emotion is there. Just lastly, I think Tony had a lightness of presence, and he didn't insert himself into the room very much. He didn't demand attention from subjects. He didn't carry on like some cameramen do, sort of telling everybody what their views are. Tony didn't. He held back. There was a distance. He kept himself to himself. Sometimes it was hard to actually know what Tony's political views were. He didn't. He was charming. He chuckled. He laughed. He made people feel comfortable, and that then allowed something to develop. And so he didn't do a lot of talking, which I think was another part of his skill. And when he knew he had it, he knew he had it, and I certainly knew we had it. And then there was time to go to lunch.
Can I interest you in some patisserie?
That's a good one. Thanks, Jerry. Thank you very much. We will keep moving because we're actually a little bit behind time, although each of these clips we could go on talking about. Next up is Kay Pavlow's film from 2003. It was from a series done at Film Australia called Under One Roof, about different migrant groups, and this one is called the Charkos Family. Andrew Aristidis was the editor again on this. And Leo was on sound, just by coincidence. The Charkos Family was the first episode of a 3 one-hour series, Under One Roof, produced in 2003. The series takes the viewer into 4 different family homes and opens the door on contemporary family life. Inside Australian homes, it finds the ties that bind families together and the pressures that pull them apart. While each episode is a discrete, independent story, they all deal with family. And Leo tells me that Tony loved this film so much that in his semi-retirement, he screened this scene at every camera class workshop. And people often asked, who was that on the second camera? Well, there wasn't a second camera, so have a look at this.
Έχεις πιάσει πόλεμο με τα αρνί. See, he wants to hold it there. He won't fall off. Δεν πειράζει, αυτό πάει από εκεί τη διαφορά.
Για να μην...
Jack of all trades and a master of none.
No, I'm going to get in trouble. It's getting rude now.
Στην Ελλάδα που είμαστε, πάντα. Κάθε Πάσχα την ημέρα του Πάσχα πρέπει οπωσδήποτε να βάλουμε αρνί στη σούβλα. Αλλιώς δεν είναι Πάσχα.
Oh, there you go. Having a pig. Gonna get in trouble now.
Why will you?
No. Poor Dad.
Ποιος πολύ εσύ. Άμα έρθουν θα φύγουμε εμείς. Don't worry.
Ποιος θα έρθει. Οι υπόλοιποι.
Ποιος θα έρθει.
Don't worry. What number is that still?
Yeah.
Oh!
Yeah, well. Sorry.
Here we go. Number 6. Estás a mestre, eh? Listos? You have to learn to say estás a mestre.
Estás anesti, Marco?
Hey,
ready and smack.
Όχι άλλο. One. No more. You still go to bingo?
Σήμερα δεν έχει μπίνγκο.
You still go to bingo though, don't you?
Αμέ, όσο βαστάνε τα πόδια μου θα πάω. Άμα πέσω κάτω, ελάτε να με σηκώσετε.
Δεν έχεις πέσει ακόμα.
Κοντεύω.
Όμως δεν ξεχνάς τίποτα.
Πουράγιο μου πονάνε όλα, μου πονάει το χέρι.
Εντάξει, όμως ας το πόνο. Το πόνο άστο όμως.
Όλα πονάνε. Tomatoes come from Flemington markets, but who buys these tomatoes? Mr. Steele. He doesn't do many things right, but this, he's a master at it. This wasn't from Steele, by the way. I bought this from Carl's. Η Δεσπίνα ήταν μικρή, δραστήρια. Η μωρό ήταν και πήγαινε και έκανε δουλειά. Ξύλα κουβάλαε, πέτρες κουβάλαε, ό,τι ήθελες όλα. Εσύ φεύγεις, Εσύ? You're not good anyway, got it. Έγινε αυτό από φούτι. Ήρθε εδώ, πήγε σχολείο, είχε μανία με το σχολείο να πάει. Τόσο ξέρουμε, δεν μας έκοβε κι εμάς. Να την αφήσουμε να προχωρήσει, να πάει σχολείο, να γίνει κάτι. Και αν δεν πιάσε δουλειά, για θέλαμε να ξεχάσουμε το σπίτι.
I like watching it turn around.
Εκεί ήταν πολύ φτώχεια, ήταν ο πόλεμος. Περάσαμε πολύ μεγάλο πόλεμο. Πήραμε μια βαλίτσα και ήρθαμε στην Αυστραλία να κάνουμε λεφτά. Να καθίσουμε 2 χρόνια και να πάμε πίσω. Ακόμα είμαστε εδώ.
Director Kay Pavlou.
The great thing about Tony too, you could see how much of that was in Greek. It wasn't like that every day, but what was incredible was the way that he could develop a relationship with people that was beyond language in some ways. So just a bit of background. I'd made documentaries, but mainly they were interview-based and, overlay. I hadn't done an observational documentary before. And then just before this, I was directing drama. So I was out there directing The Cloud's Daughters with a camera crew with a gaffer grip and 2 cameras. We were planning to make this observational series. And someone said, get Tony and Leo. Okay. So the first day, and I'm thinking, how are we, they're Greek, they're a lot shorter than Tony, and how are we going to get all this coverage that I'm thinking, that's with OzDox, that's what you want. It's like drama. It's not like an interview and overlay. It's, you want all the shots and you want to be able to cut it and weave it and tell the story. Without voiceover if you can. So he just developed a relationship very quickly with the family. And probably he just loved them and they loved him. And partly, you know, they were loud. They weren't shy. They wanted to be on camera, too much so that they actually used to get dressed up and put their makeup on, and it took a while for them not to have makeup on at breakfast. And but it was about, you know, presenting not a facade, but they wanted to present the perfect family. There were 4 generations living under one roof with a couple of levels, and they didn't know that we were looking for the cracks under the surface, for the real drama underneath those relationships. And Tony developed a relationship with them very beautifully, and in some ways, because he's quite obsessed, he was very obsessed with family, I think, and we talked a lot about family. So the first day I remember thinking, okay, how's this going to work? And yeah, they're a lot shorter than him and they move quite quickly, and there was very tall Tony with his boating shoes and these Greeks running around, and he was just so fast. And Leo was a little bit slower, but still very... Yeah, I thought, how are we not going to get microphones in shot? But Leo, they were like it was a love story to some degree. There was a symphony between them. They could anticipate each other's moves. And my thing was to duck behind the furniture, because he'd move so fast, all of a sudden you've got to work out.
Suddenly you're in shot.
Where you're not got to be, where you can't be. So it was like this little dance. Tony would dart, Leo would step, and I would duck. So it was a dart, step, duck. And it was pretty fast.
They don't teach that in film school.
No, you can't. And it got so much that the grandchildren, so like 4 generations down, they got to the point where they would ignore us at dinner, and they started referring to us on camera as the others. And there was a film at the time with Nicole Kidman, and the others were ghosts. So they would say, so, are the others going to stay for dinner tonight or what? And we just keep filming, of course. And that didn't matter, because Tony be quickly getting other shots that we could use elsewhere. And I think one of the things, apart from Tony, and everyone's talked about how he listened, how well he moved, and how he could anticipate how a scene was going to be cut, and he would get all the actions and the reactions, and the details, and the cutaways, and the dog. But it was also the relationships that he built with people, and otherwise you couldn't dart around like a bunch of ghosts. There was no way. And I think one of the reasons this shoot was quite special, because I ended up making 2 documentaries with Tony and Leo, very lucky, was how much he became part of the family. And I think for Tony, family was, you know, very important. And he would talk about growing up as an only child, and at the back of a hotel, and he would speak about how his parents didn't have time for him, and his nanny brought him up, and we had lots of conversations about family. And so I think for him to capture the minutiae of a family and to really wait for those moments where there was an argument, we kept waiting for those 2 to fight, which is very predatory of documentary makers, to, you know, wait for the conflict. But he would know how to capture it, even though he couldn't understand sometimes. You could see he was filming a lot of time when they were speaking Greek. And of course, I mean, I can speak Greek and I could help him with that, but he didn't need it. He understood the drama. And I think to some degree, you know, Tony would create family wherever he went, and that was part of his way of weaving in amongst the dynamics. And so Tony had a lot of families with all the documentaries that he made. And I think that was lovely. Yeah. So, and I won't talk about the tarts, because, yeah, we always had to have tarts in the afternoon. And he would weave his way into, and the family would feed us all the time, because Tony became part of the family. And in fact, we kept saying, no, you don't have to feed us. Leo would say, we don't have to feed us. And Tony would say, well, you know, if you're going to cook anyway. So that's... yeah, seeing it again and seeing how much Greek was being spoken just reinforces how much Tony understands beyond. I'm speaking present tense. It's really interesting how much he understood dynamics beyond language.
Yes, I think that's what you just said there is a beautiful way of expressing it. Tony had many families.
He did.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kay. Thank you. Our next film is called Atlanta Blues. It was made in 1996. Tim Clark is the director and Paul Cantwell was the editor. Quick synopsis, it's a verite documentary shot in Atlanta during the Olympic Games. It observes the impact of the Games on the city by following Atlanta Mayor Bill Campbell and Sydney Lord Mayor Frank Sartor. Sartor is on an evaluation mission. Although it was shot in the OzDox style, the film is less about the individuals and very much a portrait of a city in crisis during the Atlanta Olympics of 1996. Just one little thing which Leo has pointed out, it's interesting to observe Tony's energy and speed while maintaining his eye for the absurd, which has been mentioned before. Look out for the shot of Bob Carr outside the hotel and his reaction when he realises the camera is on him.
WSB meteorologist Kirk Mellish. Scott, today right through Friday, partly sunny, hot and humid, highs 91 to 94 and lows 71 to 70.
With the city's new paint barely dry, it's now the day before the opening ceremony of the games. The IOC Hotel, Atlanta's Marriott Marquis, disgorges its very important guests, the inner circle of the Olympic family. Frank Sartor's morning newspaper carries the story of a TWA air disaster off New York. Talk of terrorism has raised the temperature in Atlanta.
I'm off to CBS for the Today Show in Sydney.
All right.
Yeah, what am I here for, Beth?
Well, we're looking at cultural venues. We're looking at...
No, we're looking at... Write the things down.
Yeah.
We're looking at... I'm here for the flag ceremony. No, here for the flag ceremony.
Yeah, bring the flag home.
The flag.
We're looking at city dressings.
24 hours. Gonna rock and roll, y'all. Gonna rock and roll. Bye-bye.
On this night, Atlanta seems at peace. Things at last are going well. By 1 a.m. on a sultry morning, the crowds have relaxed around Centennial Olympic Park.
We just, the immediate reaction was that was the sound effect, and then we realized, no, that's not, these people are hurt, and there were people screaming and yelling, and then we heard, of course, people started yelling things about bombs, and from there...
Around 1:15 this morning is when this explosion went off in Olympic Centennial Park.
Apparently at the base
of a light tower. Many people.
Federal officials have told CNN it appears to be a pipe bomb.
Downtown Atlanta is shut down right now. You can't drive down there.
We have not been able to independently confirm that, but the FBI has indeed confirmed that the first explosion was caused by a bomb.
That it was left in front of the soundstage, and that he did see some kind of flash before it went off.
Shrapnel, flying metal through the air seems to be one of the causes of an awful lot of the injuries.
I got to tell you, it's a very eerie situation down here, standing on the street with people almost in a daze. Some people from news organizations obviously here, but other people who were in the park.
Pourquoi on a vu cette explosion tout à l'heure et il y a moins de panique, hein. Il n'y a plus de panique, les gens sont beaucoup plus calmes maintenant. Ça va?
Everyone has been jolted from their sleep. At the press centre, the game's organisers and a shaken mayor gather to respond.
Clear the stage.
With the dawn comes the full shock of the night's events. Atlanta's dreams are gone for now.
Meanwhile, we are all agreed the games go on. We will take every necessary step to protect the athletes and those who are attending the games.
That's Centennial Park down there. So all those vendors would have been put out of action, right? It's a pity to see it all. It was such a great venue. Sydney's got to have focal points for the people as well. And this business of getting overly cautious and sterilising Sydney, I don't think's on. And I don't care what the Olympic organisers think. I think we've got to have a focal point in Sydney as well, because I think this was a success. And you don't, just because of this incident in Sydney, not have any sort of public gathering.
Is there any way somebody can escort me down there to get my bicycle? We're not escorting for bikes, but...
How you doing? What time, when is this going to open up again?
I hadn't got the word on that yet.
I had heard tonight or tomorrow, no.
Won't be today.
Everything settled down for you a bit? I'm from Sydney. I'm the Mayor of Sydney. In Australia, Sydney?
Yes.
The next games? So we're here watching. Watching and looking and listening and learning and... Oh, good luck with it all. Nice to meet you. What's your name?
Officer Free, Gary Free.
Alf, Gary.
Gary Free.
Gary Free. Frank Sartor. Frank. I don't know if I'll give you my card.
The rest of the game.
Oh, we are. We're going to venues. We're watching. We're looking. We're. Yeah. Okay. Take care. Which way?
Stay around here for a bit.
Which way? Which way we go? What's all this?
Director Tim Clark. So that guy had never heard of Frank Sartor, eh?
It's amazing, isn't it? It was just glorious seeing Frank trying to ingratiate himself with a copper. I want to first thank Rod and Leo for the opportunity to share in this honouring of a great man. I first worked with Tony a very long time ago on a very short gig. It was a one-day kind of freelance gig for an American network. to interview Paul Hogan, who was then at the height of his powers as Crocodile Dundee. And Tony was suggested or was allocated. Never met him before. We did the interview. That went swimmingly, and then we got into, and we had to get some B-roll of the Harbour Bridge, and because of Hogan's legendary association with that, and so we got into Tony's old Volvo station wagon, and I sat in the front and nursed his camera, his Arriflex. And we were halfway across the bridge, and he noticed in his rear view mirror there was a couple of attractive young women overtaking in a convertible with the roof down. So he grabbed the camera, he said, "Take over, take the wheel." And he snaked out of the window. Somehow he must have still had his foot on the accelerator or the brake. Got the shot. I was just completely flabbergasted at this stage. And slid back in again, gave me the camera back. We got past the southern pylon, he pulled up, and then you were able to sort of pull up on the side there, bumped up onto the footpath, got out, got the wide shot back in the car. And I thought, what the hell? I've never seen anything like this. and I was kind of very fortunate many years later to become a very good friend of Tony's. And I asked him about this event, and he had no recollection of ever meeting me before. Such was the impact I had on him. But he certainly changed my view of filmmaking. And I was working at the ABC when the Atlanta story came up. It was a pivotal time because Mike Rubo had just been parachuted into the ABC to take over the documentary unit. Mike, the legendary documentary maker, and to give the place a bit of a touch-up. And he would be the first to admit that administration wasn't his long suit, but he brought a breath of fresh air to documentary making. And so this was the context in which we were able to go to Atlanta with an observational framing. It was still the sort of ABC tradition of 2 or 3 weeks filming, in and out. This, in fact, 75-minute documentaries it turned out to be. So we had to be very focused. But it became, because Frank was a bit reluctant, and Bill Campbell, the wonderful, charming mayor of Atlanta, had other things on his mind, we didn't get tremendous access. So it was really a film about the city, about an obdoc about a city. And I think Tony, I hope people will agree just from the little bits that they saw there, really captured that sense of what that city was like, and the extraordinary mood shift that occurred when that tragic bomb went off. And he was able to do that. No opportunity was wasted. So every time he got in a car, he was filming something, and we were recording what was on the radio. And I know people have talked about the importance of sound, and I want to stress that again. Unfortunately, Leo wasn't the sound recorder on that occasion, but I know what a symbiotic relationship they had, and nothing could be shown without fantastic sound. And I know that Tony would acknowledge that all the time. That was absolutely pivotal. And he would paint the picture, because he was always monitoring. He would paint the picture of what he was hearing. So when you make a film, it's like taking a torch into a darkened room. And I think I had a phone call yesterday from Stuart McLennan, an old friend and former colleague. He wanted to talk about Tony, and he said a very perceptive thing. He said Tony used the camera like a journalist. And this was his great kind of skill. He was a kind of investigative journalist. He would dig and uncover little nuggets that no one had thought of, let alone the director. And he was able to ingratiate himself with everyone he met, and he was absolutely unfailingly interested in people. And that was wonderful. I think a couple of the things that are worthwhile noting there from what we just saw. I love the scene, and I think people did respond to it, which, of course, Tony cottoned on very quickly, with the little machine sucking up the rubbish. Yes. And what a delicious moment. You had this observational cameraman filming someone faking reality. and so it sort of highlighted the absurdity of our industry in one beautiful moment. And of course, Tony spotted it, and I'm sure if you listen carefully, you could hear him chuckling behind the camera, as you often did when he was filming. He would often sort of chuckle into himself. Yes. Yeah? Yes. Anyone else noticed that? And that last scene with Frank, I mean, it could have been nothing. if Tony hadn't sensed what was going on, he had this sixth sense, and he knew, as it was often the case, that the important thing was not the person speaking, who was Frank, but the person who was listening. Yeah. And he captured that beautifully, and he could have walked away with Frank when it finished, but he had the presence of mind to stay, and that was wonderful. Now, I mean, he was a wonderful man. I mean, he wasn't infallible. He didn't suffer fools gladly, and I remember one famous occasion we were filming in Atlanta, and we were pushing our way through a crowd of people at a reception, and Tony was filming, and there was this large kind of southern gentleman who was keen to have a chat to Tony. He was sort of interrupting all the time, and Tony eventually hissed to me and said, "Get this guy out of the way." And he was filming, and so I summoned all my condescending best. And I said to this man, "I'm terribly sorry, but we are trying to film at the moment." He said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm just trying to tell your cameraman that the tape's not going round in his camera." So Tony sheepishly buttoned back on, and we ploughed ahead. It happens to the best of them, and he was the best of the best.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you. We're almost at the last one of our streaming program, so I hope you're still staying with us, all you streamers out there. The next film is something that I had peripherally worked on with Mark Gould. At the time, I was doing a stint as an executive producer at Film Australia for a few months, and got to go over to West Australia just in the edit stage of this. The film has got a great title, again, The Winner's Guide to the Nobel Prize. It was made in 2005. Mark Gould was the director, David Fosdick was the editor. This is a little bit unusual, and we talked about before in the Charkos family that it looked as if there were two cameras there. Well, in this case, there actually were two cameras there, because Mark, you did some of the shooting as well, didn't you? So here's the synopsis before we have a look at the clip. What does it take to win a Nobel Prize? Guts, brilliance, eccentricity? This film travels behind the scenes of the world's most prestigious prize and into the minds of two of the people who have reached this pinnacle of excellence, Barry Marshall and Robin Warren, as they prepare to receive their Nobel Prize for Medicine in Stockholm in 2005.
Yes, thank you. That should please you. You should be photographing that.
Hang on,
There you
what's
go,
happening
Moscow
here?
there.
Where's my car?
If you're a pop star or an actor or something, you're likely to get this early in your life, and it becomes part of your life, a sporting star particularly. But for a scientist, it's generally, you'll be in your 40s or 50s or 60s by the time, sometimes in their 80s, before this hits. So suddenly it's a very big change, and that can be a little hard to deal with.
Lovely. Bye-bye.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
We were treated like kings for 10 days. We'll never see it again. And the next thing, there's Chris with his stretch limo, and we get in. I've hardly ever been in a stretch limo before.
Hey.
Hello, nice to
I was
meet
only
you.
kidding. I knew that you were CNN.
Every spare moment
no, this
is
is
booked
actually
to talk to
quiet for
someone
us.
from the media.
Good, okay.
Robin, are you sure you're warm enough? I'm worried about you here.
Why?
It's freezing out here.
Where'd you get the hat?
We bought this hat. It was one of the very last ones in NK store, which is just near here. And it's really jealousy, but I've had some rude remarks about this hat, but I know they're just jealous.
It's come straight from Moscow, actually.
I've asked permission to wear it to the ceremony, but I haven't gotten the official word yet.
You're a laureate. You need permission.
Well, I had sort of suggested I could wear this, but I don't think that I can match.
No. As laid back as this odd couple of Australian science might be, when you and your old mate have a date with fate and the King of Sweden, you've got to trade in your lab coat and jeans for the full regalia.
It's a funny experience going to Stockholm, where they've been doing the Nobel Prize for 100 years, and of course it's my first time. Now, the only confidence I had was that In 100 years, you can bet that every single contingency has happened at some time and has been taken care of. So I just had to trust in the Nobel Committee and the people that were there helping me that if anything went wrong, they'd be able to fix it.
You can borrow it. You don't need to do that.
I wanted to have fun and have a really spectacular dress. When Barry asked me what it was going to be like, and I said, it's a little theatrical, and he looked a bit worried at that point.
Yeah, I said to someone yesterday, I feel like the Queen getting ready to go on tour. Oh no!
Stud broke.
Stud broke.
I mean, I'm on my own, so I haven't got a wife to help me, so I don't know how tense to put the braces.
I wouldn't like to go to too many Nobel Prize ceremonies, and I'll tell you that.
Well, the tie comes, although they show you in the drawing it's just one tie, but actually it comes in two pieces. And you've got to loop it round, stick it inside itself, and then hook the other piece on the end.
It's not a super bad problem, but my shoes are too tight. And I wonder if I could get a different size.
Okay, there's a lot of people out there waiting for us.
Police car that you heard out there was probably my shoes arriving.
Horrible. I'm scared to leave the room.
Right, we know that we left something behind. Our strategy is that Harold will come back and get it. Let's email these photos out.
No, don't you dare.
You said we've got 5 minutes.
No. But Barry, no.
She's flat now.
I don't care. No, we're not
charge it up.
We are not.
It's charging.
Barry, I want to look at it before it
Aren't you going to the bathroom or something, please? Go on.
I don't care.
Let's get a few feet out of there. Hello? Yes? We're walking out now. I've decided that I'm not going to go. Oh, okay. Well, what about if we go to this banquet thing? Okay. Let's get down there. Okay.
Well, we're going to the ball now.
Excuse me, I'm bowing. Get out of here.
Good recovery,
That's about
Barry.
right, wasn't it?
Good recovery, yeah.
You got a full bow, you got to ingratiate yourself.
That's right. So probably 30 degrees, 6 degrees.
No one else is going to do it.
It's just the most magic night. I mean, look at us all. I mean, just the warmth, the friendliness, the triumph. Toast to Mario.
You're fine, and you've got me.
And we've got
you. Right, we're off.
We're fine.
Yeah.
Round and round.
Number 16 is Harold.
Come here.
Director and second camera, Mark Gould.
Thank you. Thank you, Rod. It's a pleasure to be here and in such distinguished company and some faces that I've known for a long time. Tony and I had a running gag, which is kind of two for the price of one. And when these guys won the Nobel Prize, and actually when HDV cameras first came out, he said maybe we should buy them at the same time, then we'll get two for the price of one. And then when these two guys won the Nobel Prize, he said, oh, Australia's got two Nobel Prizes for the price of one. And this sort of became a running gag, and it popped up in conversations from time to time. And anyway, he was an extraordinary man with a great pleasure to work with. And what I have to say is he really understood trust and the relationship between trust and intimacy and getting that, garnering that trust and getting that intimacy instantly. when I was a little perhaps deferential to Barry Marshall, who's the more outgoing of the two Nobel Prize winners. We had two contrasting characters, one of whom was a highly relational, outgoing person, and the other one was an oyster. And you had to wait for the tide to rise for him to open. So I decided that Barry was going to get more screen time than Robin, obviously, because he was the more relational person, and Barry was, and Tony was a much better cameraman than myself. So give him to the relational person, and I covered Robin. But there are sequences there, there are scenes there where the roles are reversed. But I think what's remarkable was that when I first introduced Tony to Barry Marshall, and I said, Tony Wilson, this is Professor Barry Marshall, Nobel laureate. Tony just goes, "G'day, mate, show us your phone." Barry was a gadget man, and it was on. There was no bullshit. It was just, he was there. He started filming, and the relationship built, and that trust and intimacy became part of the process. And I think Tony understood very well that you cannot have good product without good process. It's axiomatic in observational documentary making, and trust leads to the unguarded moment. And the unguarded moment is what is pure gold to me. So in the sequence there where the two gentlemen are in the soutier, getting their monkey suits, I'm on one camera, Tony's on the other. I honestly can't tell you who shot what, except I think he probably did the Dutch angles. But Tony would mouth to me, 5.6. He'd say, he'd give me the aperture. And there were other occasions where he had this extraordinary relational ability. So in the sequence where they're getting dressed to win the Nobel Prize, I was with Robin, the oyster, who had no wife and was a widower and was grumpy, and actually when I got to his room to film him getting dressed, he was already dressed. And being not the super smart cameraman that Tony is, you can see me in the mirror there. On the other hand, Tony is in the other bedroom with the Nobel laureate and his wonderful wife Adrienne, who just have a domestic in front of him. And there she is with her hair in curlers. He's in his knickers, and he filmed a lot. And they had this little domestic, they had this little spat, and it's all totally cool because Tony was trustable. I think one of the things that people don't understand in modern filmmaking is that intimacy, trust, to capture the unguarded moment. When Tony went to do the deal with Andrew Ogilvy to go to Stockholm, he said, "I'll do the still, so you get two for the price of one." And so this gag continued, and it was a great pleasure. There is a sad story to tell, and it's a sort of gallows humour story, and I hope no one is offended, but the day I heard of Tony's death, I was sitting in Walter Carter Funerals in Bondi Junction, negotiating the deal for the funeral of my mother-in-law. And I got a phone call from Kathy Scott, who I think might be here tonight, saying, "Oh my God, Tony has passed away." And I was immediately shocked. But what did go through my head was two for the price of one.
Thank you very much, all those who've been watching us streaming. We're about to end the broadcast, but I would like to thank all of our panellists tonight, all of our filmmakers, observational documentary filmmakers, and some of the others that weren't quite so observational, but what a great celebration of the art of documentary filmmaking. And we thank you very much for watching, and please keep watching for future OzDox events, and good night.